Welcome to Eagle Hour, where today we dig into science and stories behind the buzzing world of insects and ecosystems. I'm Jamie, your host, and today I am truly honoured to welcome Proffesor Dave Goulson, entomologist, ecologist and passionate advocate for bees and biodiversity as the founder of the Bumblebee Conservation Trust and author of numerous books. He was listed number 8 in the BBC Wildlife magazine's list of top 50 conservation heroes, and he is certainly a hero in my eyes. Dave has dedicated his career to understanding and protecting the tiny creatures that keep our planet thriving. Hello, Proffesor Goulson. It's amazing to be able to have you on the podcast. Thank you so much for coming on. And the irony is that it's World Bee Day today, so it's awesome to be able to be talking to a bee specialist on World Bee Day.
Yeah, I'm very happy to be here.
Oh, it's amazing. I think I'm going to start off with what started your passion for wildlife?
I honestly don't know, but when I was even younger than you, about maybe 5 or 6 years old, I remember I started at lunchtimes hunting for caterpillars around the edge of the school yard and stuck them in my lunchbox and tried to rear them up. And I think, poor things, a lot of them probably died, but eventually I managed to keep some alive, and they turned into... Well, there were pretty some that turned into these beautiful red and black moths, which I now know are cinnabar moths, but at the time I wasn't so sure. But they were stunning, and I thought that was kind of magic, and I've been hooked ever since. And luckily, I've managed to make a living out of chasing around after insects.
Yeah, and would you say that it was moths that started off and then went to bees?
Yeah, definitely, moths and butterflies.
Okay.
But about 35 years ago, I stumbled into the world of bees and realised that actually, so butterflies and moths are really beautiful, but they're quite sort of simple creatures, really. They're kind of like beautiful, but a bit airheaded. Whereas bees are really clever, and they have really complicated lives. And they're super important from a sort of ecological point of view and from a human point of view for the pollination they do. And so I became kind of fascinated by the whole world of bees, and I've never looked back, really. And there's enough to find out to keep me going for the rest of my years, I'm sure.
How intelligent are bees then?
Well, so they're really good at navigating. They can find their way miles across the landscape to a patch of flowers and then back to their nest, and that's part of the reason they're clever. But they also need to learn which flowers are the most rewarding ones. So they're really good at learning kind of associations between colour and scent and shape and reward. And people have sort of tested their limits to see how clever they are, and they've shown that bees can count.
Wow.
That bees can be trained to play something a bit like football. It's not really football, but they can basically roll balls and throw them down holes in the ground for a reward. You can get them to pull on a rope to get a reward. They can recognize human faces.
Oh, wow.
So they're kind of like the intellectual giants of the insect world. They're super smart.
Yes. And you said about them recognizing human faces. Isn't that similar to jumping spiders?
Oh, I don't know. I didn't know jumping spiders could do that, but I'll take your word for it.
Yeah, I think I read somewhere that jumping spiders can recognize people's faces and recognize that person is which. I'm not sure. Maybe.
Maybe they're the intellectual giants of the spider world. It's beyond my area of speciality.
You just stick with the bees.
Yeah, there's enough with the bees.
Yeah. Don't bees, some colours they can't see, is that right?
Well, they can see more than we can.
Okay.
So their eyes have kind of peaks of sensitivity in the purples, yellows, and ultraviolet. So they can see. So ultraviolet is a colour that we can't see. And it's really weird to think there is a colour that exists, but we can't perceive it. I wonder what it looks like. Well, we'll never know.
Yeah.
But bees can see it, and actually lots of flowers have patterns in ultraviolet that we can't see. So if you take a photograph of them with a special lens, it reveals, these patterns that are invisible to the human eye, but they're there for the bees.
Yes.
So they can see more colours than a broader spectrum of colours than us, but they can't see very well at the red end of the spectrum. So it's quite unusual. Most flowers aim to be purple or yellow if they're trying to attract bees, or have ultraviolet patterns, but you rarely see red flowers because bees can't see it so well.
Oh, wow. So if, for example, they were looking at a certain kind of red, I don't know, like the terracotta sort of bee boxes behind them, would they be able to see that or not at all? Would that just look grey to them? What colour would it look like? I
guess it would look black and white or grey, shades of grey, I suppose. Although it's an interesting question. What would it look like to a bee? I'm not entirely sure, but they couldn't distinguish the frequency of light that we see as red. So I guess, I'm not entirely sure on that.
Okay. And the different species of bee, like, I don't know, a solitary bee and a social bee, can they see different colours in different species?
So far as nearly all the research on bees has been done on honeybees, because they're the sort of domestic bee that people keep in hives and that we get honey from. They're sort of scientists tend to study honeybees.
Yes.
So what I've just said definitely applies to honeybees, but I would guess most bees are similar. But actually, there are more than 20,000 species of bee in the world.
Wow.
So nobody's looked at most of them. We know almost nothing about most species of bee.
Oh, wow. So what certain species of bee do we not know much about?
Well, the vast majority. I mean, for a start, there are new species discovered every year. So there are bees we don't even know what they're called yet. We haven't given them a name. But of the ones we have named, as I say, there's more than 20,000 of those, and we've got about 270 just in the UK. I think it's probably fair to say that for 90% of them, we know very, very little about their lives. No one's ever, there've been no scientific studies. We don't know much about where they nest or what their preferred flowers are or what their enemies are or anything else about their ecology. So there's tons to find out.
And have you ever discovered a new species of bee?
No, I wish I had. I don't. I mean, most of the new species are probably in exotic places where they tend to be discovered, where we know much less about the insect life generally. And I mean, in fact, when talking about insects more broadly, we've named just over 1 million species of insect in the world. But some scientists estimate that there's at least 5 million more.
Wow.
So we've barely scratched the surface. Oh. That's my dog Poppy. She's heard something. She's not exactly a terrifying guard dog, but she's more being curious, I'm afraid. Poppy!
Silence.
Where was I? Yeah, so we haven't yet discovered the majority of life on our planet, which is really weird. And at the current rate at which new species of insect are being described, if those figures are roughly right, it's going to take another 500 years before we've given names to all the insects that exist.
And is there a particular species that you're trying to focus on at the moment to learn more information about?
My focus is really on there's a bee come to say hello. Is on the wild bees in the UK that we know have declined, and basically trying to understand how we can turn that around and encourage them and make sure that they don't disappear completely.
Yes.
So there's species like the shrill carder bumblebee, which is a really sweet, it has a slightly higher pitched buzz than a normal bumblebee, which is why it gets its name. But sadly, it's declined hugely.
Yes.
And there's only about 5 populations left in southern England or southern Wales. And it could disappear from Britain, within a few years if we're not careful. So that's one of the species that I've been sort of focused on and trying to find out more about how we can look after them better.
Yes. And what can people do in their gardens to try and help bees like the shrill carder bee?
Well, I'm glad you asked, because there's lots, and this is something I really kind of get excited about. There's 22 million gardens in the UK.
Oh, okay.
And they cover something like 500,000 hectares of land. It's a huge amount of land.
Wow.
And my sort of crazy dream is if we could persuade every gardener to make their gardens sort of bee-friendly, wildlife-friendly, then that would really make a difference. There'd be little patches of bee-friendly habitat all across the country.
Yes.
And kind of, it's sort of happening. Lots of people are doing it already. There's lots of interest in wildlife gardening.
Right.
So, I mean, it's really simple to make your garden more bee-friendly.
Okay.
All you really need to do is grow some bee-friendly flowers. There's loads to choose from, and my garden is packed with bee-friendly flowers. Catmint, for example, there's a lovely catmint just behind me over there, which is covered in bees.
Yes,
it's really easy to grow. It's really pretty. Lavender is great. There's lots of advice that you can easily find. I've got a YouTube channel full of advice about which flowers are good for bees. Try and include some native wildflowers because they tend to be really good.
Right.
Things like Viper's bugloss is a fantastic plant for bees, and field scabious or knapweed or marjoram. I've got a big bank of marjoram just behind you, which isn't flowering yet, but when it does flower, it's covered in bees and butterflies and hoverflies and so on.
Oh, wow.
So that's the main thing, is just grow lots of flowers that the bees like. Don't use pesticides. I garden without using any sprays. My dogs come to see you now.
Hello, Poppy.
And hello, Pops.
Podcasts.
Last thing you want is to attract insects to your garden and then poison them, which is what you risk doing. Hello, Pops. You could try putting up a bee hotel. So the other thing that, aside from flowers, bees need somewhere to nest. A lot nest in the ground. Things like bumblebees nest in holes left by old rodent burrows or the like. But some bees like to nest in cavities in.
Yes.
Naturally, they'd probably nest in like an old tree trunk that a lot of beetles had drilled lots of holes in.
Yes.
But there aren't many big old dead trees these days because we tend to tidy them away.
Yeah.
Which is another thing, actually, is don't be too tidy in your garden. If you want lots of insects, leave the dead heads on the flowers and don't rake up all the leaves and that kind of thing.
I see.
Anyway, so these bee hotels are aimed at these bees that want to nest in a horizontal tunnel, basically. And they're easy to make. Some of those are my homemade versions, and some you can buy them in the garden centres or online. Or whatever. There's lots of different companies that sell them, and they mostly seem to work. Stick them on a south-facing wall in a sunny spot, about sort of somewhere between 1 metre and 2 metres off the ground seems to be good.
Yes.
And with a bit of luck, you'll get these. There's a whole load of different species of mason bees and leafcutter bees, and you get cuckoo bees coming to sneak in and lay their eggs.
Yes, the sneaky cuckoo bees.
Yes, which I like, but some people get a bit upset when they see cuckoos sneaking in.
It's just part of the food chain, really, isn't
exactly.
it?
It's all part of nature. They're natural. They should be here. We shouldn't think. It's like thinking lions shouldn't eat antelope or whatever. That's what they do.
Yeah.
And the other really simple thing to do. Sorry, when I'm just finishing my list of ways to make your garden bee friendly. Mowing or not mowing is ideally. So I inherited a garden with a lot of lawn, and I've turned it all into kind of wildflower meadow, which I only cut once or twice a year.
Okay.
And as a mown lawn is pretty hopeless for wildlife. There's nothing, there's no flowers. There's not, and anything that does try to live there, we're just going to get mowed next time you get the mower out, which isn't good. But if you just leave it, it's amazing. Lots of flowers usually pop up. You get clovers and dandelions and daisies, and I've got self-heal and all sorts of other things popping up. I've even got an orchid popping up further up the garden. So it's really surprising, how many flowers there are just waiting for a chance to not be mowed and get to flower.
Yes.
It's easy. Don't mow too much. Grow some nice bee-friendly flowers. Put up a bee hotel and don't spray any pesticides. Do those 4 things. And if everyone did those 4 things, then all of our gardens would be buzzing with life, and that would really make a difference.
Yes, and you were talking about cavity nesters. Aren't they otherwise known as like renters or aerial nesters? Yeah,
there's various kind of names for them. But what we're talking about are bees that basically want some kind of empty, dead-end, hollow tunnel It doesn't have to be straight. It doesn't have to necessarily. They're quite opportunistic, and naturally they probably nested in all sorts of wonky little cavities. And sometimes you'll find mason bees in odd, like in the cracks in the window frame, or even in folds in a sun brolly when it's folded up. They'll think there's a little crack and they'll try and nest in, which isn't so good when you then put the brolly up, unfortunately for the bees. But anyway. They're not that fussy, but the modern sort of tidy world might not have too many opportunities for them. So it's nice to be able to provide them with a nice, safe. Well, I say safe home. Just yesterday morning, I was woken up by a woodpecker eating my solitary bees. Oh, which again is all part of nature. Yeah. We shouldn't complain, but I did poke my head out the window and shout at it and shoo it off. I fear quite a few of my mason bees got wolfed down.
Oh, that's not great.
Well, I mean, I love the woodpecker, so what can you do?
Yeah, it's all part of the food chain, isn't it?
It is. So there's a common carder bumblebee just landed on the nasturtium over there.
Ah, well, there are bees surrounding us absolutely everywhere at the moment, all pollinating the flowers. The honeybees are everywhere, all the bumblebees are out, and all the solitary species. And for all our viewers and listeners out there, what is the difference between a solitary bee and a social bee?
So, how long have you got? So bees evolved from wasps about 120 million years ago. There was a solitary wasp, that decided to basically it turned vegan because wasps are predators.
Yeah.
And it would have the ancestor would have made a little burrow probably and stuffed it full of paralyzed maybe caterpillars or spiders and laid its eggs on them. But the ancestor of the bees decided to use pollen instead. And so that was the kind of first bee, and obviously it's worked pretty well for them. And there's now over 20,000 species of bee, all descended from that one ancestor.
Yes.
Most of them are solitary, as the ancestor was, which basically just means the female bee makes her own nest.
Yeah.
Same as these
the
ones behind
bees.
me. The mason bees, the female bee finds a hole and puts little balls of pollen in there and lays her eggs. And she does it on her own. Nobody helps her. So there's no workers. There's no queens. The boys are useless. But some bees evolved to become more social.
Yes.
And it started, we think, with... So a female bee starts a nest in the spring. And she rears some daughters. But instead of going off to make their own nests, the daughters stayed with their mum and helped their mum rear more daughters.
I see.
And that we have some bees called furrow bees in the UK that do that. And they just have one generation of daughters that don't go off themselves and build a nest. And they then help rear another batch of females that will hibernate and build their own nest the following spring. So that's kind of like a really basic type of sort of social life.
Yes.
But some bees have taken that further. The bumblebees take it a step further where they rear hundreds of daughters, all workers because they're called. And so the mum then becomes the queen, the one that's laying all the eggs. And bumblebee nests live for a few months just through the spring and summer, and may get up to 300 or 400 workers.
Okay.
But the kind of the ultimate, I suppose, in social living for bees is the honeybee.
Yes.
Which the clever trick honeybees have is that they've worked out how to survive the winter without hibernating. So that's why they make honey.
Yeah, to keep them warm.
So basically, they've got something to eat when there aren't any flowers, and it's when it's cold out and too cold to go foraging. So their colonies, the bumblebee colony has to die at the end of the year, but the honeybee colonies could go on for years and years and years. So the queen can live for years. And they can have 50,000 workers all helping their mum. And she might, this time of year, a honeybee queen might be laying 2,000 eggs a day. All of them whisked away and looked after by her army of workers, and they're gathering food from all over the landscape, from miles from the nest. So it's quite an enterprise, a bee colony. But it's proved to be super successful, and the honeybees are one of the more... someone come to see me.
Yep. You're talking about me.
Yeah. I think that is a honeybee, actually.
Yeah, I think it is a honeybee.
It's not staying still. But it certainly seems to be quite a successful lifestyle.
Yes. And another thing with honeybees is that they also shiver to keep warm as well, which the bumblebees unfortunately don't do.
They actually, sorry, I'm going to have to, as bumblebees are my real speciality, they do shiver. You can't see it very easily. They don't actually move their wings, but their flight muscles in the thorax, the middle bit of the bee behind the head where the wings are attached to, those flight muscles vibrate.
Oh, I see.
Just got some big wood pigeons just crash landed behind me. And actually bumblebees are really good at keeping warm in cold weather, much better than honeybees. So
Wow.
in early spring, for example, honeybees tend to stay in their hives until it gets well above 10 degrees centigrade. But bumblebee queens come out in early spring, and they can fly around when the air temperature is below freezing. But the inside of the bee is more than 30 degrees because they've shivered like crazy, and they're big, and the fur coat helps to keep the warmth in. But so that's what bumblebees tend to be found in quite cold places, like it doesn't feel cold today, but Britain is normally quite wet and
it's
cool.
quite wet and miserable.
And they thrive right up in the mountains in the Alps and up into the Arctic Circle. There's a bumblebee called Bombus polaris that lives its whole life cycle in the Arctic Circle, and it's especially big and furry. I've never seen one. I'd love to see one. But the downside of this is the poor bumblebees, they overheat if it gets too hot. So they really start to struggle when the weather's really, really warm. Because, they're flying around with a big furry coat on, and they literally can't get rid of the heat quick enough. So climate change is a bit of a worry for bumblebees.
Yes.
To be serious for a minute.
And is there a certain way that they can use to cool down, or are they literally stuffed?
Yeah, well, they cool the nest by acting like little sort of air conditioning units. So when the nest starts to get too hot, the workers, they gather around the entrance and they fan their wings to try and pump hot air out of the nest and cold air into the nest.
I see.
Which will work up to a point, but obviously if the air outside gets really hot, then they can't sort of blow cold air in.
Yeah.
So that, they can cope up to a point, but when it gets really, really, really hot, they struggle.
Oh, right. So when there are some hot summers, they can struggle a lot more than honeybees do. Yeah,
unfortunately. And that, much as, we all love the sunshine.
Yeah.
And it's been an amazing spring. And right now, the bees are thriving of all types.
Yes.
But if it gets really hot, above 30 degrees in summer, then that's when they tend to struggle. And also, it's an interesting year. We've had this amazing sunshine.
Yeah.
And so far, the insects seem to be enjoying it. But if it carries on and we don't get any rain, then flowers will stop flowering and they'll stop producing nectar. And that could be quite bad in the longer term. So I've kind of got my fingers crossed that at some point soon it rains, because we really need some.
Yeah, the bees are definitely wanting some water right now.
Yeah, I fear they are. But fingers crossed it's on its way.
Yes. Isn't there a benefit when you're a solitary bee species and that it is quite hot? Because you have that long tube, you can go right down to under the ground for some ground nesters to keep cool?
Yeah, so when it's really hot, they do have the option of just hiding from the heat.
Yeah.
But it means they can't be out foraging, so they're missing the opportunity to be laying, gathering more food, laying more eggs. So it's not a perfect solution, but yes, you're absolutely right. Some of the ones that go underground, they might be 10, 20 centimetres below the soil surface, which is probably much cooler.
And one of your recent videos that you've done was on hairy-footed flower bees and their nest box. So, they nest in clay, and that holds water. Is that even better for them?
Well, I don't know in terms of temperature, but I love hairy-footed flower bees.
Yeah.
I'm rather sad, actually, because I think I've probably seen the last for this year. They're only on the wing in the early spring. They come out in March and fly until about the end of May. And they're quite big, kind of bumblebee-sized solitary bees. As you say, they won't nest in this kind of wooden bee hotel.
No.
Partly because the holes are probably too small usually, but even if they weren't, they're different to the mason bees in that hairy-footed flower bees want to excavate. They don't just want a straight tunnel. They want to make little chambers off it to the side.
Yes.
And so they need something they can dig in, clay or soil of some kind, which is why I've been experimenting with clay nest boxes for hairy-footed flower bees, and there's one just a few feet behind me, which was absolutely packed this spring. So much so that I saw the cuckoo. There's a specialist cuckoo of hairy-footed flower bees called the mourning bee, which is a slightly sinister-looking, kind of ashy grey looking bee, quite big bee. It was sneaking in and out of the holes when the mums were away, laying its own eggs, which kill the baby hairy-footed flower bees. But again, it's all part of life's rich tapestry and everything, But hairy-footed flower bees, I think, are probably, being big and furry again, are probably insects that like cool weather, and they are active in the early spring when it's cool. So probably they're not going to enjoy overheating either.
No,
if it gets too hot.
probably not.
Might be why they finished a bit early this year, I suspect, because it's been so warm.
And also because of the cuckoos. And we are talking about loads of cuckoo bees, and they are called kleptoparasitic, aren't they?
Good.
And for our viewers and listeners out there, can you tell them what kleptoparasitic actually means? Yeah,
so broadly they're very similar to the bird. I mean, that's where the name cuckoo obviously is borrowed from. So cuckoo bees, there's slight variance on what they do, but typically the female cuckoo flies around looking for the nest of a host species, and they're usually pretty fussy. They'll just attack one or two species of host.
Oh, right.
And having found a nest, she'll usually wait until the mum is away, and then she'll dash in, open up one or more of the little cells that the mum has made, which will have a baby, an egg usually, or a little maggot inside with some food. And so the cuckoo lays its own egg, which hatches really quickly, and this tiny little maggot has extra big jaws, purely for the purpose of murdering the host's offspring. And having murdered it, it then eats all of its food. So that's where the klepto means to steal, basically. So,
okay.
So that's the basic life cycle. There are some slightly different ones that attack bumblebees. So there are bumblebee cuckoos, where they go in and actually kill the queen bumblebee.
And they take over, don't they?
They do. It's like a sort of power grab, They go in and kill the poor queen. Or sometimes they just sort of dominate her, and she just goes and hides in a corner and sort of gives up. I should say that cuckoo bumblebees are big. They're much stronger than the poor queens. So they quite easily sort of beat them up or kill them. Anyway, they essentially then enslave the worker bumblebees, which and the workers don't really have any choice about it, because there's they're helpless. They've got nowhere else to go. They can't leave and have their own babies because they're not able to mate. So they just sort of go along with it, which is a little bit sad, but it's all nature.
Yes, it's amazing those different cycles that different bees and kleptoparasitic bees use, isn't it?
Yeah, I think one of the things I kind of like talking about this for is because most people have no idea there's all these weird and wonderful kind of lives, different types of bee doing different types of thing. I think it's quite interesting if you kind of quiz someone. Most people sort of they maybe think there's one type of bee and it lives in a box and it makes honey. But if you ask them to draw it, they'll draw something that's got yellow and black stripes and is big and fat and furry, which is not a honeybee at all.
It's a bumblebee.
Exactly. So people are really confused about that, and they usually don't understand that they're totally unaware that there are any kind of solitary bees. That's like a revelation to most people. So I think it's it's one of the fun things about nature is there's just incredible diversity of different creatures that have found different ways to live.
Yes, and there's loads of different types of solitary bee as well. It's actually quite surprising that there's over 200 different species of solitary bee that not many people know about. They just think of bumblebees and honeybees. It's incredible.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's a shame that many of the solitary bees are really hard to identify, and some of them are very small. Some of them are only sort of 5 or 6 millimeters long, and they look really wasp-like and little black things, really easily overlooked. The mining bees, there's one particular family of bees that all nest in the ground, which is why they're called mining bees. And there are dozens and dozens of those. Even in my garden, I've found well over a dozen species of mining bee.
Wow.
And they're mostly, there's a few distinctive ones, but most of them look really similar. And unless you've got the time to sort of peer at them under a microscope, they're really hard to identify, which puts people off, and I think it's a bit of a shame. But if anyone's interested in identifying bees, start with the bumblebees as the bigger, more colourful ones, and then sort of, once you've mastered those, try picking off some of the solitaries as well.
I definitely did start with trying to identify bumblebee species, and I had a little chart, and when I got the hang of that, I did a bee course, and it looked into all these solitary bee species, and that's how I really learnt there is a different species of bee apart from bumblebee and honeybee. There is also solitary as well, and it was actually incredible how many unknown species that well, not unknown, they are known about, but they're not very well known. It's more the bumblebees.
Yeah, as we were saying earlier, most species of bee, nobody's ever actually studied them. Nobody's sort of set out to find out all about their lives. So there's tons of interesting stuff that, even in the UK, that people could find out new things about bees.
Yes.
Which I think is really cool and exciting.
Yeah, it's really exciting because you could just discover new stuff about the bees, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's incredible. All the information that you can learn from bees just by watching their behaviour, isn't it?
So I wish the impression I have is that most people they're not really interested in insects. They're frightened of bees more often than not. And anything that buzzes near them, usually they flap around and try and swat it, which makes me really kind of sad. And I do think if... that's a drone fly. Higher pitched buzz. Where was I? Yeah, if you could take people and just sort of get them to spend a few minutes in a garden full of flowers or in a meadow, and actually get that sort of sit down or get down on their hands and knees and actually look at all these amazing little creatures, they'd quickly kind of, I think, would learn to love them, or at least be curious and think, that's really interesting. What's that thing doing? Why is he doing that? And they'd get hooked. But because they never do that, they never find the time to pay any attention to these little creatures. They never learn to like them or appreciate them. And they don't understand how important they are. So I guess sort of part of my mission in life is trying to persuade people to love insects, which got a long way to go. But, so we're getting there. The more people like insects than used to. And bees are a really good place to start. They're a bit of a sort of poster child for the insect world. Because I guess in part because they're some of them are quite cute. So they're easier to sort of sell in that respect. But also because it's easy to explain why we need them, because they pollinate our crops. Not just bees, I should say. There's lots of insects that pollinate, and again, this is something that many people don't really appreciate. They think it's all done by bees, but actually, pollination's done by hoverflies and wasps and beetles and butterflies and moths and all sorts of other insects. But between them, it's about 3/4 of all the different types of crop that we grow in the world need pollinating by an insect. So, if we didn't have bees and other pollinators, then we wouldn't have. You go to a supermarket and it's full of all these fruits and vegetables that look, amazing kind of display of rows and rows of them from all over the world. But most of that wouldn't be there. There wouldn't be apples, strawberries, raspberries, tomatoes, pumpkins, squashes. Even things like chocolate and coffee are insect pollinated. So, basically wouldn't be able to feed everybody without insects. So we really do need to look after them, and they are super important.
Yes. And for all our viewers and listeners out there, can you explain why bees are becoming threatened and endangered?
Yeah, I can. It's lots of reasons, really. But loss of habitat sort of globally is still a big issue. We're still chopping down rainforests and so on, which are very biodiverse places in the world. In the UK, we used to have. We've got a plane going over there.
Everything's going off.
There was one habitat in particular that's really good for insects, which is, or scientists call it a species-rich grassland, but hay meadows and chalk downlands, which are lovely places to go, full of huge diversity of flowers.
Yes.
In 1930, Britain had about 3 million hectares of those flowering. Every farm had hay meadows because they needed hay to feed the animals in the winter.
Yes.
And that was where all the bumblebees and butterflies and so on lived. But sadly, someone invented silage production, which is a completely different way of producing fodder for livestock. And the hay meadows suddenly became redundant. And sadly, we ploughed up 97% of them in the middle of the 20th century.
Wow.
So all that lovely flowery habitat full of buzzing insects was all just lost. And it was all done for good reasons, to provide lots of food for cows and sheep and so on. But I don't think we realised quite how much damage we were doing at the time. So anyway, more broadly, sort of the farming has tended to become a bit less friendly for insect life. Bigger fields, a lot of hedges were ripped out. Farmers use a lot of pesticides these days. And that's the sort of biggest, that combination of things is the biggest driver of insect declines. But there's other stuff too. Climate change is starting to kick in. Light pollution impacts on some insects. Confuses moths at night and that kind of thing. Got problems with invasive species that can displace. In some parts of the world, there are invasive bees, in fact, which is not something we have too much of a problem with here. But I'll keep this story slightly short. But I was lucky enough to go to South America a few years ago to study buff-tailed bumblebees, our native species, which have been introduced into Chile and Argentina. Well, unfortunately, they're impacting on the native bumblebees of South America. So it's a species that we normally think of as a lovely, benign native bumblebee, in the wrong place can be harmful. And we have a bit of a habit of shipping things around the world rather foolishly.
Yes, that is similar with native plants and non-native plants, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. We have lots of problems in the UK with things like Himalayan balsam.
Yes.
Which is, or Japanese knotweed or rhododendrons and so, although those examples are all quite interesting from a bee perspective, because bees absolutely love the flowers of all those plants. So just down the hill from here, there's a stream, and its banks are absolutely covered in the Himalayan balsam. It looks beautiful when it all flowers with these pink flowers.
Yes.
And the bumblebees go mad for it. It's a huge source of food for them. But it's an invasive species that's displacing all the native vegetation from the stream banks. So it's probably doing lots of harm broadly environmentally. But purely from a bee's perspective, it's kind of hard not to like, because the bees certainly like it. So sometimes it's kind of confusing knowing what the best thing, if you could get rid of it all, that probably would be the best thing to do. But the bees would not be happy.
Nah, they wouldn't, because they like it. But the issue is the native plants aren't getting pollinated because they're lower down and they're tolling really, really high.
Well, they just get smothered because the Himalayan balsam shoots up. It's the most amazing plant in the speed it grows. You keep seeding in my garden from down the hill. And this little seedling will pop up about this time of year, and then you look away and look back. It seems like a week later, and it's 2 meters tall. It grows and it grows in these sort of dense stands particularly along stream banks where it likes the damp soil. But it dies at the end of the year. It's an annual plant.
Okay.
And when it dies off, there's nothing. It's basically smothered all the other vegetation, so that then the stream banks are all bare. Getting a bit away from bees here, but the stream banks are then all bare, which means they erode. The water washes away because there's nothing holding the soil together. So yeah, the invasive plants are bad generally, have all sorts of impacts. But it's just a sort of interesting twist in the story that they can also be good for bees.
Yes, it's quite weird because you think if it's good for the bees and the bees like it, then it's okay. But actually, it's sort of the other way around, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, probably imbalanced. We should be trying to get rid of them. But of course, another aspect is it's really difficult. And, then I think we're sort of stuck with a lot of these invasive plants because there's... they thrive so well here that you could spend millions and, countless hours trying to get rid of them, and they'd spring back the following year. And you kind of wonder whether it's actually, worth the effort, or maybe we could spend our time and money more wisely elsewhere.
Yes, because did they spread their seeds quite quickly then and easily?
Yeah, well, Himalayan balsam has explosive seed pods, and if you wait until it starts to produce seed pods and the flowers start to wilt, which is I guess about August time.
Okay.
If you touch one of the pods, if it's ripe, it'll go with a little pop, and seeds will spray all over the place. And they go 2 or 3 meters from the plant, so that's a seed dispersal mechanism that the plant has.
Yes.
It's really cool, but obviously that helps them be this sort of really powerful invasive weed.
Yeah, it's quite incredible how they spread their seeds. There are loads of other plants as well that can sort of do the same sort of procedure, isn't there?
Yeah, actually, there's a broom over there, which is a native plant, but I grow it because the bees love the flowers again.
Yes.
But that does the same. It has like pea pod seed pods that look like little peas. And on a hot day, they dry, and they're sort of like spring loaded, and then suddenly there's a loud crack and they twist. And sort of 2 halves split apart, and the seeds get flicked out.
Right.
It's exactly the same kind of thing.
Yeah.
Plants have all sorts of interesting ways of getting their seeds
Yes.
dispersed. Some of them fire them. Some of them drift them on the wind like a dandelion.
Yeah.
Some of them stick their seeds in fruits to persuade a bird to come and eat them and then poo them out somewhere down the way. There's all sorts of kind of interesting ways that plants have evolved to get their seeds spread all over the place.
Yes. And while we're talking about plants, would you say that you could whittle down to 3 top plants that are native that the bees would go for and that are really good to put in your garden?
Yeah. I think I actually already mentioned them, but I'll mention them again.
Okay.
So we did do it. We actually did a sort of scientific study where we planted about 105 different plants in standard sized plots, including lots of different native wildflowers and some of the sort of ornamental non-natives, and counted. I say we. It was a lady called Rosie who did most of the counting.
Okay.
Anyway, so I can't take the credit, but she counted for 5 years how many insects visited each patch of flowers. So we have good data as to which ones are best, and the top 3 wildflowers were greater knapweed.
Okay.
Which doesn't sound knapweed. It's a shame it's called knapweed, because I think that puts people off, because it's a beautiful native wildflower. It looks like a bit like a sort of giant thistle flower. There's some growing in a pot just over there, but it's not flowering at the moment.
Oh, okay.
Viper's bugloss, which is this beautiful, tall, sort of purpley blue flower that bees go absolutely bananas for. And the other one is marjoram, which is a native wildflower. People often grow it as a garden plant because you can use it in cooking as well. But
I see.
it's really good for bees and other insects. So they're three good places to start. But there are loads of other native plants that are really good for insects generally.
Yes.
And the advantage of growing natives over non-natives goes beyond pollination and attracting pollinators, because it also, lots of insects eat the leaves of plants, and the ones that the herbivorous insects tend to be much fussier about what they eat than pollinating insects. A bee doesn't really care where a flower comes from, as long as the nectar tastes nice. It's not fussy. But things like caterpillars, they tend to be really fussy. They'll usually only eat the leaves of one type of plant, or maybe two or three related plants. So for example, the orange-tipped butterfly. There's a lovely spring-flying butterfly, and they've been around recently in my garden. They will only lay their eggs on lady's smock or garlic mustard, which are both cabbage family wildflowers. So if you grow those in your garden, there's a really good chance you'll get a female orange tip coming and laying her eggs. And then you can watch the little caterpillars grow, and you've got your own little population of this beautiful butterfly in your own garden, which is really cool. But if you don't grow the food plant, there's no chance they'll lay their eggs, because that's all the caterpillars will eat. And so every native plant that you grow is food for somebody, sometimes several different creatures. If you grow a tree, if you've got room in the garden to plant an oak tree, say, that can provide food for hundreds of species of insect. Whereas, if you planted a non-native, like a gum tree from Australia, which people often plant in their gardens. They're completely useless for wildlife. If you've got a pet koala, it's great, but otherwise they're absolutely rubbish. Native plants are good for bees, and also tend to encourage herbivorous insects like the butterflies. So that they win all round. I'm not saying people shouldn't have ornamental non-natives in their garden as well. I have a real mishmash of all sorts of things that bees like. There's lupins over there, the catmint, there's geraniums, there's comfrey. It's a mix of natives and non-natives, but between them, they provide food right through the spring and summer for a whole range of different critters, and that's what I'm trying to do, basically provide homes for as many different creatures as I can. There's a really, sorry, I'm on a roll.
That's fine.
There's this really interesting example. There was a lady in Leicester, a lady called Jenny Owen, who had a little wildlife garden of right in the urban part of Leicester. But she spent 35 years identifying everything she could in her garden, which, impressive effort. And her species list after 35 years of looking was 2,673. Isn't that, I think that's just amazing that you could find that many different types of plants, animal, mostly insects, in a garden. So we could all have thousands of species living in our back garden with just a little bit of, do a few simple things to encourage them.
Wow, that's incredible. How many species were actually found? So how many species have you counted here in your garden?
Well, I'm slightly embarrassed that I haven't tried anywhere near as hard as she did. I do have a list, but I haven't totted it up recently. I've got about 40 odd bee species. We've had about 30 butterflies, about 40 birds. So I could tot them all up, but I'm way short of her total. And if you really want to go to town like she did, you have to go into the really tricky groups like flies and parasitic wasps and so on. There are all these little insects that there are loads of different species, but they're real specialist jobs. You need to have a lot of time to try and work out what they are. But even without knowing exactly how many species you've got, I love just, I guess it gives me a lot of satisfaction wandering around my garden, just seeing what I can find. And knowing that, there are all sorts of problems in the world, but that at least in my garden here, all is well, everything's happy. There's lots of creatures busily going about their lives, untroubled by the things that might be happening elsewhere.
Yes. I really enjoy going around our garden as well, because you just get to see loads of species of insects, because we let our garden go wild, and the grass grew really, really tall, and it's going again with fresh shoots everywhere. And the dandelions had their round in the year. The bumblebees loved it, and now the buttercups have come in little clumps everywhere, and it's just amazing how
you just get waves of different flowers, don't you? That between them, there's something for the bees to feed on the whole year through if you've sort of managed your garden well enough. There's lots of actual scientific studies showing that it makes you happy being out in nature in a green space, listening to bird song, seeing butterflies and bumblebees and so on. It actually makes your heart slow down. It makes your blood pressure reduce. It makes you less anxious. It does all sorts of really good things for you. So it's not just the bees that benefit from a wildlife garden. We actually do directly benefit ourselves. It makes us healthier.
Yes, and you were saying about birdsong. We're surrounded by birdsong at the moment. Have you ever tried to identify the different calls?
So I've never been very adept at identifying birdsong. I know the obvious, the easy ones, but I find a lot of them quite tricky, and I've never had a brilliant ear for it. But so I recently discovered this app. You've probably tried it, the Merlin bird. It's a Cornell University thing. And I downloaded it on my phone. I was just sitting on the lawn over there and clicked, identify birds. And it's brilliant. It's such good fun, straight. I mean, so within about 10 minutes, it picked up about 15 or 20 different species.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure. I mean, it shows you, you can play back recorded song of the species to check whether that is sort of, does it sound like what you're hearing in the real world?
Yeah.
And it shows you pictures of what the bird should look like if you don't know. And I just thought it's a really great sort of gadget for introducing people to, because it's quite hard to start from scratch. But if it's, it says there's a blackbird singing and it flashes up, blackbird and it's in orange, and you listen, okay, that's the blackbird then over there, and the song thrush is over there, and there's a wood pigeon in the background cooing away, and then occasionally it picks up slightly harder to identify things, like there was a black cap somewhere over in those trees over there, which I didn't know that's what it was, but when I played it back, it clearly was. I thought it was brilliant. Anyway, it's such fun. So I often sit out with a drink of an evening and just try and see what else I can pick up and try and learn them. And it seems it's a better way of memorizing that, learning the difference between the different songs. So I'm making progress. I'm not as rubbish as I used to be.
Yeah, because when I started, the planes are going again.
There's a peacock butterfly just shot past.
Oh, wow. Peacock butterflies are so beautiful. Anyway, when I started my passion for wildlife, it did start off with birds. So I had a couple of books, and what they had, I think they're RSPB books maybe, and they had calls on one side, so you could press the call and hear what it sounded like. And that's sort of where my knowledge for bird calls came from. And just sitting here and listening around, I've heard robins, green finches, blackbirds, blue tits, grey tits, sparrows, everything. It's been incredible, the sounds that have been coming out. It's amazing.
Yeah, you were lucky. I think learning them young is the way. And hopefully you'll go on to become really good at identifying all the really tricky stuff. But no, it's just such a peaceful experience listening to birdsong. But if you can identify some of them as well, it adds an extra kind of, I don't know, makes it more enriching somehow. Yeah,
sometimes it does, because you're like, oh look, it's a robin. Oh, I can hear a song thrush in the distance. It's just nice to sort of go, oh, I know what that one is. It's quite fun, isn't it?
It's funny because when I was a kid, there wasn't an app or anything. It was a long time ago, back in the dark ages. And I think I started out trying to spot birds as well as being interested in insects, but I found it really difficult because I didn't have a sort of family member that was really good to teach me, and there wasn't an internet to help with pictures and sounds and so on. And in the end, I kind of got fed up. Like, I found birds frustrating because they were always miles away in a tree and I couldn't quite see them properly. Whereas insects I could get really close to and actually kind of, take a photograph, look them up in a book, be pretty sure I knew what they were. So I think it was that kind of made me focus all my interest in insects rather than I'm to some extent a failed ornithologist, I think, from when I was little.
Yeah. Is that sort of the reason why you chose bugs then? Well,
I think it might have been with hindsight. I mean, I didn't really think about it at the time, but I did. I got bird ID books and I got some binoculars, and when I was really quite young, and tried to sort of develop an interest in it. But I found it quite frustrating because there weren't that many species I could get a good look at, and whereas with bugs. I quickly realised there were loads of them, and I could get close to them, which I liked.
Yes, you can get very close. And bugs with macro photography are incredibly good because you can get up close and you can see all the lenses in the eye and the hairs on their back. It's amazing what you can see detail-wise.
You take better pictures than I do, I have to say. I'm looking forward to seeing your painted lady photos when you were taking pictures of one earlier.
Yes.
But, I think I need to improve my setup, actually. I've got camera envy looking at all your kit.
Well, have you ever tried macro photography then?
Yeah, I have. I've got a Nikon camera and a 100mm macro lens, which isn't bad.
Yeah.
But it doesn't focus quite as close as I'd like to, for some of the smaller insects.
Yeah.
Work out what it is this I'm being buzzed by somebody.
There's a hoverfly.
It's another dronefly.
It's been loving flying around and making some lovely buzzing sounds as we're talking.
We've got lots of droneflies. I've got some hoverfly lagoons dotted around, which are breeding places for droneflies and some of some of the hoverflies that have aquatic larvae, which is one of the little things you can do in a garden to encourage nature. It's basically, there are some species of hoverfly that naturally would lay their eggs in tiny puddles full of rotting leaves.
Oh.
So perhaps in a crook in an old tree. Oh, common card of bumblebee.
There he was.
Or anywhere where a little bit of water collects and so there's some leaves have fallen in, and as the leaves start to rot, you get bacteria, and that's what the larvae of the hoverflies eat. It's not very glamorous, but they lay their eggs around the edge of little puddles.
Yeah.
And the eggs hatch into what are called rat-tailed maggots, which are these fabulous.
They're
not everyone's cup of tea.
I've seen those a couple of times before.
But they're these quite chunky maggots with this really long, which is it's a breathing tube. It's the tail. It's like a snorkel. Enables them to get oxygen while hiding in the murky liquid in their puddle. Anyway, I've dotted a few sort of artificial habitats for hoverflies around.
Yes.
Which we call, it's rather glamorous, hoverfly lagoons. But they do work, and they're fun little things.
Yeah.
I've actually got I'm involved in there's a citizen science club called the Buzz Club.
Oh, yes.
Where we run projects with members of the public to find out more about sort of what works best in the garden to encourage wildlife. So we've got one project on bee hotels where we ask people to try making or buying, whichever they prefer, a bee hotel, and then tell us how well it does, basically, reporting back to us on how many occupants they get. And we've got more than 500 people doing that right now.
Okay.
And it's helping us work out which models of bee hotel, which designs are actually the best ones, which do the bees really like, which then means we can give people advice and make bee hotels better. And likewise with hoverfly lagoons and various other projects. So if anyone's interested, Google the Buzz Club, and you'll find all the details. And anyone can take part, any age, any level of knowledge. You don't need to know anything at all about insects.
Okay.
And you'll learn a little bit about science, and hopefully, more importantly, learn to appreciate the little creatures that live in your garden.
Yes. And what's been the top bee box so far?
Well, so I just happened to be sitting in front of it.
Oh!
Look,
Oh, a jewel
there.
wasp.
A jewel wasp just going in.
Oh, that's
I haven't seen any bees go in there, but that's why she's come out again very
While
quickly.
we've been talking, I've seen a couple of small, like, little scissor bees having a look.
Yeah.
Is that anything at all?
Yeah, so these terracotta things are a new design that someone sent me.
Oh, okay.
I don't actually know if they work, but I said I'd try them out. But clearly the jewel wasp thought there might be something in there.
Yeah.
Look, they're the most beautiful insects that most people
are
never
beautiful.
notice. Isn't that stunning?
Amazing colours. So,
Yeah.
are jewel wasps kleptoparasitic?
Yes, they're all doing the
right.
same thing as the cuckoo bees.
Yes.
They're quite cool as well. So they can roll into the underside of the abdomen of the wasp is concave, and she can roll into an almost perfect ball.
Oh,
So
wow.
if she's in a nest and the mother bee comes back and she might be somewhat angry and tries to bite her, she just rolls up into this perfect sphere, and there's nothing to get hold of, or she can't really be damaged. So usually what happens is the female bee just throws her out the hole, and then she lives to carry on doing what she's doing. But,
there's another one. It's up
I missed
there, and the one
yes,
just above the terracotta.
Yeah, so this one here, to answer your question, is the model
Oh.
that on average has done best.
Okay.
To be fair, we haven't tested out every possible design. I'm sure there are other designs that are pretty good.
Yeah.
But that one is slightly edging it in terms of average number of holes filled compared to the others. But I don't think they're that fussy.
Oh, right.
You just need a dead end hole, and ideally different size holes to cater for different sized bees.
Okay.
So anything between about 4 and 10 millimeters diameter.
Right.
And I think wood some people have tried making them out of plastic and metal, and that doesn't seem to work very well. So make them out of wood or bamboo. Put them on a sunny wall, and seems to do the job.
Oh, wow. This is really cool, because Dad and I built a little bee box at our garden, and we put it south facing in a sunny spot, and I think there's around about 5 red mason bees that have took a lot of interest into it, as they have filled up their holes with all the clay, and it's really cool because you can see them coming in, coming back out again with clumps of mud. And then you also get little scissor bees checking it out, going, I'm not too sure. It's incredible seeing
the mason bees, the females have these special horns on their face that are just for carrying and moulding mud.
Oh, wow.
If you look closely, you're right. They fly back with these little, like a ball of mud stuck to their face, held there by these 2 horns. And then they paste it into, they make little dividers between the cells inside. They lay the female eggs at the bottom of the hole, and male eggs towards the entrance, so the males can get out first in the following spring. They spend it seems weird, but the red mason bees are only flying for a few weeks in the spring, aren't they? And then they'll finish soon.
Okay.
And their offspring will develop to be adult bees in the tunnels, but then will sit there for 8 months as an adult bee. Just waiting for next spring. So they could emerge in the summer and have another generation, but they choose not to. They just so there's just one brood per year on an annual cycle. But they become adult bees quite quickly once they're sealed in, and then for their whatever reasons that they've never explained, they decide to just sit it out until the following spring.
Okay. That's very interesting that they like to just wait for a particular sort of season in the year to do it.
I mean, maybe they seem to love, and they're really good pollinators of fruit trees. They seem to love apple blossom and tree blossom in the spring. So that might be, what they're targeting, as it were. And there are plenty of flowers in the summer, but maybe they're just not ones they really like. For some reason. But
that would make sense, because we do have an apple tree in our garden, and this year it blossomed and the bullfinches didn't go for it, so we So we had loads of blossom for the bees, and when you stood next to it,
Oh, they
you could
love
just
it, don't they?
hear humming. It was incredible. I think there were like around about 1 million honeybees and bumblebees and little kleptoparasitic species coming around, hoverflies. They're all there, and they were all pollinating. It was just incredible.
It's such a lovely atmosphere beneath a fruit tree when it's covered in insects all
Yeah,
visiting the flowers.
definitely.
It's interesting that for some reason, which hasn't... Oh,
A bit like a wasp, huh?
I didn't quite catch this. I think it's a
Come to say
hoverfly.
hello.
Where was I? Yeah, so mason bees are very good at pollinating apples for some reason. So
Okay.
someone once worked out how much pollen is deposited on each flower by a bee visit, and they compared mason bees with honeybees.
Right.
And mason bees are about 100 times better for some reason than honeybees.
Wow.
Partly maybe because they're furrier, or maybe they carry the pollen on their bellies rather than most honeybees carry it in balls on their legs.
They carry it on their scopa, don't they?
Yeah, so that may be part of it. But yeah, so they're if you've got apples or apple trees in your garden, then encouraging mason bees is a good way to make sure they get properly pollinated.
Yeah, well, I think ours definitely got pollinated because we have a fair few mason bees around that, like the bee box. So they must have been there for the apple. Oh, hello. Yes, hello. For the apple blossom. They must have been there,
Yeah, I'm sure they were.
collecting all the pollen they could. I think we did actually put up the bee box just before they started blooming, the apple tree, so it might have been a good
Perfect
one for
timing.
them. Yeah, perfect timing, because we haven't had much time to be able to build them. But recently we did make an extension on it for leaf cutters. So we put little bamboo shoots that were 15 centimeters long, and we put them on each side and of the box, which had the clay in the front, in the middle. So we had sort of like leaf cutters there and masons there. We
Yeah.
haven't had any leaf cutters yet, so fingers
they're
crossed.
barely out yet.
Okay.
They fly later in the year. So it's actually what you've done is a really good idea. I sometimes recommend to people to put up another bee hotel
Yeah.
when the mason bees are finished, because there's a danger that sometimes in a good year for the mason bees, they fill every hole.
Oh.
And so by the end of May, there's nowhere left. There's no accommodation left. The hotel's fully booked, you know. So then the leaf cutters come, and there's nothing for them.
Yeah.
And there's some other species that come later in the year too, like yellow-faced bees and resin bees.
Oh,
And again,
yes.
if the mason bees have hogged all the accommodation, so having another hotel or extending your hotel or whatever, basically provided some empty holes in late May, June, when in time for the leaf cutters, is a really good idea, because it means then you can have mason bees and leaf cutter bees all thriving alongside each other.
Yes. The good thing about our nest sort of hotel at the moment that there are still some holes available for the other bees. There was only around about 5 that were filled up. So 4 to 5 were filled up.
Room
so
for expansion at the moment.
Room for expansion.
But no, they sometimes the mason bees, just the population takes off and they'll fill every hole in sight.
Oh, wow.
I've had some years where there've been hundreds and hundreds of them buzzing around, but they seem to kind of come in booms and busts. It's quite unpredictable. There's so this has been a fairly quiet year, not helped by the woodpecker, but also they get pollen mites and parasites of various types, as well as cuckoos. There are little things called Houdini flies which lay their eggs in solitary bee nests. And I think so. Probably the poor years for mason bees are driven by these parasites. Would be my best guess. But there's this whole kind of world around these, which is why I just love sitting here. In a spring morning. Yeah. I bring my coffee out here and. If the sun's shining, and just watch what's going on, and like the jewel wasps and so on. There's all sorts of things turn up. It's not just the bees. There's a whole kind of web of life around those hotels.
Do you come across many unique sort of behaviours between different species when you're watching?
Well, it's quite interesting to see them. They do interact. They'll often go into the same holes and then have a kind of scuffle over, whose hole is it. And you see that sometimes within species. You often see mason bees, females. I don't know whether they're one of them's made a mistake and has got the wrong hole, or but they both seem to think that it's their home, and they can get quite agitated fighting over them. But sometimes you also see tussles between different species. And I mean, as you sit and watch as well, one of the things to look out for is some of those holes have got spiders in them. So particularly false widows seem to be quite common in bee hotels.
Okay.
And if a bee is prospecting for a new hole, she has to be really careful, because if she picks the wrong one, a spider will jump out and grab her, which I've seen a few times, which is slightly sad to watch. But part of nature.
Yes.
It's spiders have to make a living, I guess. But I always feel a little bit sad when I see one wrapping up a bee that's still alive and buzzing, and wrapping it up in the web. Poor thing. But I don't intervene. It seems like best to leave nature to take its course.
Yeah, I might keep an eye out on our bee box, because I have seen a bit of silk going along, and I've seen the sort of entrance hole, let's say, of where she might be hiding, and putting her legs all over the little silk strands that are going in, so she can feel and she can tell if there's anything that's touching it, and then go, I'm going to go check. And then comes out, no, nothing.
Yeah, they're quite cool. I think spiders are fascinating. If I had my career over again, I might have studied spiders, but and they really are unappreciated by most people. But
spiders definitely don't get the
pretty cool creatures, really.
Yeah, spiders definitely don't get the best of press.
I mean, actually, bee hotels, there are loads of non-bees that live in them aside from the spiders. I mean, earwigs love them.
Really?
In fact, one of the reasons why bee hotels usually do better if you put them on a wall or a fence. Rather than a tree, which although you think a tree would be a good place to put a bee hotel, nail it to a tree. But if you do, it usually fills up with earwigs, and then you don't get any bees, because the bees can't move in.
So it turns into an earwig hotel.
An earwig hotel, which is fine. I love earwigs. I think they're really cool creatures. But if you're dead set on bees, then you're going to be disappointed.
Yeah, it's not exactly the best thing.
And the reason the earwigs like them is earwigs are nocturnal, but they like to forage in trees. So as it gets dark in the evening, they'll climb all the way up the trunk, spend the night looking for aphids and other little insects that they eat.
Yes.
And then in the morning they'll climb back down again and find somewhere on the ground to hide for the day. But if you provide them with a nice dark hole halfway down the tree, that saves them from bothering to go all the way down to the ground.
Yeah.
So they basically adopt bee hotels as their own little homes. And anyway, so don't put your bee hotel on the tree unless you want an earwig hotel.
Unless you want the earwigs to turn up.
Yeah.
Do they prefer like clay, or do they prefer like bamboo? Do they go for certain ones, earwigs, or are they not too fussy?
As far as I'm aware, clay hotels are a bit of a new thing.
Okay.
I only started experimenting with them last year, and I thought, rather kind of stupidly, that I'd invented them, or at least because I knew the hairy-footed flower bees like to excavate clay, so I thought I'll make a hotel for hairy-footed flower bees, and I put it on YouTube, and was very proud of myself until somebody pointed out there was another YouTube video from a guy about 4 years earlier who'd already done exactly the same thing, and I hadn't noticed, so I wasn't the first at all. But anyway, they're not very popular, so I don't think we know what else goes in clay hotels.
Yeah.
I would have thought earwigs probably would. I don't think they're that fussy.
No.
But time will tell. But they're certainly very happy with wooden and bamboo hotels.
Yeah. It's one of those things in that you've just got to keep looking at to see if an eel would go in it or something.
Yeah, I mean, some types of hotel you can dismantle, so like this one. You can take it apart to see what's inside, and
wow.
And also you can get hotels with windows on. Well, I don't know if you've ever seen one of those, but so they're like, I used to have one. Sadly, it rotted and fell apart, so I can't show you. But it was on the side. It had a panel that you could unclip, and behind the panel there was a perspex sheet with the tunnels behind the perspex. So you could see the little balls of pollen that the mum had made in the mason bees and the little clay walls that she'd constructed, and you could see the little grubs growing and the whole life cycle. You had to keep the panel, the cover on most of the time, but you could peek in when you were feeling curious to see what was in there, see if it was full of earwigs or whatever. And those are really fun, because otherwise, you're restricted to just watching the things, bees and other insects coming in and out of the hole. You've no idea what's happening inside. You don't know whether they've got loads of babies in there or if there's nothing in there or whatever. So they are a bit more expensive, unfortunately, but a hotel with a window is quite fun.
Yes. So I think I might have seen pictures of my bee course, maybe of the tunnel, but not exactly seen it in real life. It must be incredible, because don't they sometimes line the sort of chamber, let's say?
So mason bees usually just make a neat curved clay wall.
Okay.
And the sides of the chamber aren't covered, but leafcutter bees, they use silk. They're called leafcutter bees, in case anyone listening wonders, because they snip little semicircles of leaf.
Yes.
And you can see them flying, carrying the leaf, because the leaf is often bigger than the bee. And they line the tunnels entirely, as well as building walls out of leaves. And they sew the leaves together with silk that they produce. So they're completely different kind of structures.
Yes.
And then there are yellow-faced bees that produce a kind of, looks almost like cellophane. They excrete this sort of semi-transparent sort of gloop that they fashion into little walls. So there's lots of different ways of doing it, but they're all basically making little sort of individual cells for their babies to live in out of one material or another.
Yes, they always use different types of material depending on the species, don't they?
Yeah, I mean, there's several different species of leafcutter bee, but they nearly all use leaves. Mason bees, most of them use mud, but some of them use chewed up leaf sort of paste, like sort of leaf mache or leaf resin or whatever. Not resin, leaf mastic it's sometimes called.
Okay.
And for example, the blue mason bee, which is a sort of, it's not really blue, disappointingly. It has the slightest hint of blue if the sun's shining on it. But when I first saw a blue mason bee, I was a bit disappointed that it wasn't blue, really. Anyway, they don't use mud; they use leaf mastic, unlike the red mason bees. So you can tell from looking at the filled holes, you can get some idea of what species filled the hole.
Right.
But there's a bit of overlap, so it's not it's not definitive, but it's fun to try and work out.
Yeah. Well, this has been amazing. So now I think I'm going to move on to the special Eagle Hour question, which is, if you had £500 million, what would you do with it?
Crikey, that would be fun, wouldn't it? What would I do? I think I know what I'd do.
Okay.
So, I don't know whether you've ever gone to the Knepp Rewilding Project. It's about 25 miles west from where we're sitting in West Sussex. It's basically a giant nature reserve, but it used to be a farm. 3,500 acres. So what's that, about 1,500 hectares? It's a big area.
Oh, massive area.
And they just turned it over to nature. And about 25 years ago, and it's an amazing place for wildlife now.
Yes.
I could heartily recommend you paid a visit, especially this time of year when the nightingales are all singing, which is
I've never
one of the
seen a
specialities.
nightingale.
You'll be hard pushed to see them, but you will hear them everywhere.
That'd be amazing.
They sing from the bushes, so they're hard to spot. But
Okay.
anyway, but so that's probably the best known rewilding project in the UK, and it's just a really lovely example of. It shows how nature can recover if you just let it. You know, it doesn't need. It can look after itself if we just stop messing. And that's basically what they've just done. Nothing for 25 years, so you can go to a field that was a field of wheat a quarter of a century ago, and now it's turning into a forest, and it's really cool. Anyway, I would love my own rewilding project where I could just sort of be like my garden, but on a massive scale, and most of it just left to nature to do its own thing.
Yeah.
That would be cool.
Yeah, that would definitely be amazing, and I think the bees be thanking you for that. All the flowers.
They would, yeah. That would. They would certainly thrive.
Yeah, it'd be amazing to have a little area. Well, not little, a big area.
Well, if I can ramble on a bit more, there was this guy who was a hero of mine, an American insect scientist called E.O. Wilson.
Okay.
And he wrote a book called Half World? Anyway, he advocates in this book that we should try to set aside half the world for nature.
Yeah.
And I mean, it'll never happen, but I think there's a brilliant ambition. I'd love to see it happen. And if I had 500 million, was it 500 million? then setting aside more of the world for nature would basically be what I'd want to spend that money on.
Yeah, it'd be amazing to try and do that, just to try and give those little wild areas with native flowers back to the insects, the birds, because when you have the plants, then you get the insects, and then you get the birds, and then you get the bigger birds. It's that massive food chain that can reconnect, isn't it?
Yeah, it's one of the things I love about studying the natural world is it's so complicated. There's so many different creatures all interacting in all sorts of surprising and weird and wonderful ways that we don't really understand at all yet. You know, we think we're quite clever, but actually we've barely scratched the surface on understanding how ecosystems function, and all, you know, things like the fungi that connect the roots of trees, and the pollinators that work symbiotically with plants, and there's just this amazing intricate web of life that we're good at messing up, but we're not very good at understanding, and I just find that fascinating.
Yes, it's really fascinating seeing all the different species of insects and all the things that we could do to try and improve their sort of habitat, let's say.
Yeah, long may they thrive.
Yeah, especially the insects.
Yes, indeed.
And the bees. Yeah, these soft toy bees have definitely helped inspire me to like insects. It's just the character that you can give an insect and what you can see in the insect, isn't it?
Yeah, well, bumblebees are easy to like, to be fair. I picked one of the more charming insects, and they are not quite as adorable, perhaps, in real life as this is, but they're pretty cool creatures, and they're hard not to like, I think.
Yes, and the one thing that I find is that if I get a toy that looks like the real animal, for example, this bumblebee, and I name it a certain name, and I give it its character and an accent and a whole family and things, when I do meet the real animal, I keep mistaking it for being, for example, this bumblebee's name's Bumble, which is pretty simple, but yeah, I liked it. And every bee that I see now is called Bumble, and it's become a little bit of a
don't try cuddling
thing.
them is all I would say. They're charming creatures, and they don't want to sting, but they will if they're really under pressure.
Yes, and the other thing is that only half the population of bees sting. Is that right?
Well, only the girls sting.
Okay.
But that's not half the population, because in at least the social bees, most of the bees are girls.
Oh, okay.
But no, so the sting evolved from the egg-laying tube, which obviously only a female would have an egg-laying tube. So male bees can't sting. They can't do much, to be fair. They don't do any work. They don't gather food. Don't defend the nest because they can't sting. They're sort of redundant, really. So it's sort of true. The female half of bees sting and the males don't, but there are a lot more females than males most of the time.
Yes, and you can also add the stingless bees into that sort of stingless area as well, can't you?
Yes, sadly we don't have any stingless bees in Britain, and most people have never heard of them, but in the tropics, particularly in the Americas,
yes,
there's this whole family and they have big colonies like honeybees, but for reasons nobody's ever explained, they lost their sting, and that seems really crazy,
It's a bit weird.
Got a colony. Having a sting would be a really helpful way to defend yourself, because they make honey like honeybees do, which, makes them a target for things that want something sweet to eat. But they've lost their sting and instead they just bite, which is slightly mysterious.
So is that the only way of defense then?
Yeah, you can open up a stingless bee colony and stick your head in if you want. And the biting is not very nice. It's sort of itchy and uncomfortable, and they get in your hair and they're all madly trying to nibble you, but they haven't really got any weaponry to speak of. So,
oh, bless them.
It does seem like there's some aspects of kind of evolution which nobody can explain.
Yeah, they have a bit of a hard time, don't they? Because they've only got that little bite. So did they get a lot of predation, stingless bees?
Well, they seem to have thrived for millions of years without a sting. So, I mean, I'm sure they do get predated, but clearly not so much that they aren't still going. So. Yeah. It's kind of mysterious.
It is a little bit mysterious. Still a little bit of a mystery why, isn't it?
Yeah, well, it's kind of good that we don't understand everything, isn't it?
Yes, because you've still got those little secrets to try and unlock. And it's just like the hexagons, isn't it, with the honeybees, that it took like thousands of years for humans and very, very, very complex mathematics to work it out. But the bees just already sort of knew it, didn't they?
Yeah, it's an interesting one because it's easy to. I talked about bumblebees being intellectual giants and so on, but it's not. They don't think quite like we do. It's sort of they've evolved to do things. So it's not like a bee sat down and thought, I wonder what's the best way to design my comb. It's like got a pen and paper out or whatever. They've just over millions of years somehow evolution has perfected what they do.
Yeah.
But it's certainly, if you look inside a honeybee hive, it's an extraordinary, beautiful structure.
Yeah, it is.
Although if you look inside a bumblebee nest, it's a right old mess. They're really kind of slapstick the way they build it all. It looks like a total shambles. There's no obvious order to it at all. And they poo in the bottom of the nest, which honeybees don't do, and so on.
Yeah, it's a bit weird.
There's some big contrasts in the way different bees live their lives.
Yeah. So why are bumblebees a lot more messy compared to honeybees?
Well, partly you maybe can explain it because their nests don't have to live very long. They're kind of temporary. It's more like a sort of, if you see it as, instead of building a house, they're building a kind of temporary bivouac for a few months, and they know they're all going to be dead soon. So they're not building to last. Whereas the honeybees, their comb may be there in 20 years' time.
Yeah.
So they've got more incentive to build something that's solid and well designed. And bumblebees can poo in their nests because, well, it doesn't matter because they're not going to be there very long, so they don't mind. And actually, they do have symbiotic creatures like I get in my garden the bumblebee hoverflies, which lay their eggs in bumblebee nests, and the maggots of the hoverfly eat the detritus in the bottom of the bumblebee nest and help to keep it clean.
Oh, wow.
So perhaps because of those, the bumblebees don't need to worry. But sounds like the toilet cleaners of the bumblebee world.
Yeah, little cleaners in the background sweeping everything up. So would you say that the bumblebee hoverfly is in the sort of kleptoparasitic area because of that?
Well, no, because it's not doing the bees any harm at all. It's not taking their food. It's making use of their waste. So it's either, well, there's a term called a commensal, which is an organism that lives with another organism but has no actual effect on it, good or bad.
Yes.
Or if they're actually helping to tidy up and get rid of the mess, they might actually be symbiotic, beneficial to the bees. But they're certainly not parasitic because we're pretty sure they don't do them any harm.
They're not parasitic compared to other species of hoverfly, are they?
No. Hoverflies are a really diverse group, actually. It's hard to generalize. Well, a bit like the bees, as we've already said. There are hoverflies that scavenge. There are hoverflies that eat aphids, predatory. There are the aquatic ones we talked about earlier. You need a whole separate podcast on hoverflies.
Yeah, I think we could just talk for hours and hours about hoverflies and insects, really, because they're just so diverse, aren't they?
Well, they've been around. The reason they're so diverse is because they've been around so long. So the first insects, we think, evolved about 480 million years ago.
Wow.
Which is mind-boggling.
Very long time ago.
The human brain doesn't really understand numbers like that. But that's twice as long ago as the first earliest dinosaurs appeared.
Wow.
So, imagine something twice as old as the oldest dinosaurs.
Yes.
So they've had a really, really long time to evolve, to speciate, to turn into this, incredible diversity of critters that we have today.
Yes, and I'm pretty sure that the worms definitely come into that category. I think they're like one of the oldest species of animal on Earth, as they lived with and before the dinosaurs, which is incredible, really.
Yeah, I don't know when the first worms evolved, but they would be a very, very long time ago, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But worms, I love worms, and they're incredibly diverse themselves.
Yes.
But they haven't reached quite the levels of success that the insect world have.
Yeah.
And part of the reason for the success of insects is because they were the first things that evolved flight, which of course worms aren't very good at.
No.
And that enabled them to colonize all over the world and get into habitats that other creatures couldn't get into, and so on. And we think they evolved flight about 380 million years ago. So it took them 100 million years to take off. But when they did, it was a big advantage.
Yes, as I've recently also done a spider course, and in that spider course they were talking about a sort of mechanism called ballooning. Do you know what ballooning is?
Yeah.
It's for everyone that doesn't know what ballooning is, what it is literally the spiders spray out a triangle of silk that sort of turns into something that a negative charge connects with positive charge molecules that are in the air, and they both connect together so that it creates lift, and that's why the spiders can be seen flying
I didn't know about the electric
silk.
charge. That's really interesting.
Yeah, it's incredibly interesting because that sort of means that they are, when there's like a volcanic eruption and everything's hasn't got much life, spiders are usually the first species to get there because they balloon. Yeah,
I knew they spun silk as a sort of way of drifting on the wind, but I didn't know the thing about the electrostatic charges.
Yeah.
It reminds me that, so it was recently discovered that the bees use the electrostatic charge of flowers to give them a clue as to whether they're full of nectar or not. As apparently, if I get this right, I think sticky up things, to be not very scientific, tend to have a negative charge for some reason, which I'm not a physicist, I don't understand. And bees flying, I think, have a positive charge, again, for reasons I don't understand. So when they come together, they cancel each other out. So a flower that's recently had a bee land on it won't have the charge. And so a bee, as it approaches a flower, if it can detect a negative charge, it knows that flower hasn't been emptied by somebody else recently, so it will land. But if it doesn't, it thinks, there's no point, and it goes off, looks for another flower. It's just this whole work, it's like they've got a superpower that we don't have. We can't detect electrical fields at all. But insects and perhaps spiders, I don't know, can do something that's completely beyond our imagination, really.
Yes, and another thing about spiders and bees sort of merging together with the negative and positive charge is that because the silk is negatively charged, the bees sort of get dragged towards it, and that's one way that the spiders can use the sort of negative charge of their silk to attract bees, which is also another incredible thing about negative and positive charge, really, isn't it?
So does that mean, does that mean then that if the web that this ballooning little spiderling, if it's attractive to the charge on a bee, does that mean the web might stick to a bee and then the spiderling gets towed across at high speed by being hitched to a bee? I don't know.
That might be a problem if it does happen.
Well, it could be an amazing way to disperse,
Yeah.
hitchhiking on a tow rope attached to a bee. I'm probably getting the wrong end of the stick entirely, but that sounds like something someone should investigate.
Yeah, it sounds possible. Maybe.
You never know.
It might be. Well, I think there is a certain species of insect that does actually use bees and flies to transport. So it hitches onto the back of them. I think that comes into mites, as well as I think there's some sort of British species of scorpion that's like 2 millimeters long that can hitch onto the back of them. Things like that. So it might be possible. They might use it as a diversing thing.
Yeah,
Definitely something to try and look up.
There are certainly oil beetles that
Oh, wow.
baby oil beetles climb onto flowers and wait for a bee, and then they latch onto the bee and wait for it to carry them back to its nest, and then they jump off and eat its babies.
Yes, I remember seeing a violet oil beetle
Oh, yeah. Stunning creature.
Oh, it was incredible. The colours were amazing. And the weird thing was, I think it was crossing the road. She was crossing the road, and she was massive. She was
they're
about
really
that
slow,
big.
lumbering creatures.
But I got her on my hand, and we put her somewhere safe off of the road in the direction she was trying to go. So helped her out
Very
a bit,
good.
so she
the
doesn't
bees
get
might
squidged.
not thank you, but they're really rare. Sadly, oil beetles, they've declined a huge
Yes.
amount. I think some species have gone extinct in the UK, but presumably because the hosts are not as common as they used to be. But they lay millions and millions. The reason they're so big and fat, the female oil beetle, is because they produce incredible numbers of babies.
They do.
Probably because it's such a hit and miss life cycle. They've got those little baby beetles have got to find a flower and then find a bee and then find the bee's nest, which is probably a bit of a
tricky.
a haphazard kind of life cycle. But some of them obviously make it.
Yeah, some of them do make it. It's sort of, if the bee goes, then the kleptoparasitic species of the bee go as well, don't they?
Well, they're all interconnected, aren't they? And often kleptoparasites and parasitoids and so on they always have to be rarer than the host.
Yes.
And obviously, if the host population falls, and then their population falls, and they're likely to go extinct before the host because they're rarer. So a lot of our rarest insects are parasites or cuckoos and so on.
Yes.
So we when we do get them, like the ruby-tailed wasps and so on, we should be pleased and cherish them because it's a good sign. It's a sign that there's plenty of the hosts and all is well.
Yes, and we're talking about the sort of native good kleptoparasitics, but aren't there some mite species that have come over with invasive species of honeybee to Britain that haven't been doing a very good job?
It's not the honeybees that are invasive species, but it's the yes. So the varroa mite.
Yes, that's it.
It's which is a sort of blood-sucking parasitic mite that naturally feeds on the Asian honeybee, which is a different species of honeybee. It looks quite like our honeybee. It's a little bit smaller. But the Asian honeybee is co-evolved with this varroa mite. And the varroa mite doesn't do it too much harm in Asia on its natural host. But we then took European honeybees to Asia, where they were exposed to the varroa mite, which jumped ship from the Asian bees onto the European bees, which have no natural resistance to the varroa mite, and then we accidentally brought infected bees with mites on them all over the world, not back to Europe and everywhere else. So these varroa mites have spread from Asia to the whole world, and they're a real threat to honeybee health because they don't just suck the blood of the bees; they spread they vector diseases, just like mosquitoes spread malaria in humans, they spread viruses that themselves can then kill the bees.
Yes.
So it's another, it's a bit like we were talking earlier about invasive species. We have an unfortunate habit of spreading things around the world, and it's usually not a good idea.
Yeah, and those diseases include, I'll show, twisted wing infection.
Oh, yes.
I know that's not exactly the best prop in the world.
No, that's very
Sorry,
good.
Bumble.
Deformed wing virus, it's usually known as, and it's exactly it. And that is vectored spread by the varroa mite, and it's one of the nastier viruses of honeybees.
Yeah.
And as you say, as the name suggests, in severe infections, the poor bees' wings don't develop and it can't fly. So it's not a lot of use, unfortunately. So yes, it's a regrettable error on our part, along with many of the things we've done over the years. But it'd be nice to think we'd learned our lesson, but I'm not entirely sure we have.
I'm not 100% sure either myself if we have learned our lesson. It'd be nice to think that we have, though.
Well, perhaps some of us have anyway. Maybe we'll get there one day.
Yeah, maybe. Well, I think I'm going to move on quickly to a different subject, because you've also done numerous different books, haven't you? Including Silent Earth that we have there and Insectarium.
Indeed.
Tell us a bit what inspired you to do some books.
So the first book I wrote was the first sort of popular science book. Was called A Sting in the Tail, and it's basically about bumblebees. It's the lives, the hidden lives of bumblebees, and my life sort of and adventures I've had over the years, studying them. And I wrote it because I just thought I was a bit bored of academia. Involves you do science and then you publish these really boring academic papers that in obscure journals that hardly anybody reads.
Yeah.
And I thought there was maybe a bigger audience out there, the people that might be interested to know more about bumblebees. I think they're really cool, so I thought maybe other people might if they learnt about them.
Yeah.
So I wrote a book. I didn't have a publisher. I didn't know if anyone would ever sell or anyone would ever read it. And it did took me over 2 years to find a publisher.
Oh, wow.
But then it did really well. So it's a strange business, publishing, but it became a bestseller somehow. So I thought, well, I'll do it again. And I wrote another one about meadows, the second one, A Buzz in the Meadow. And that one did all right. So I did another one and another one. And here I am with number 7 and 8, I think, there.
Oh, wow. They're in order. That's incredible.
Those two are, yeah. So Insectarium is the newest, but that's sort of like a picture book, really. It's about 200 of the world's weirdest or most beautiful or most interesting insects. So it's sort of hand-picked by me. And illustrated by an artist called Emily Carter.
Yes, they are amazing drawings.
They're cool, aren't they? I don't know how she does it, but
I'm still trying to get that detail in my drawings.
Yeah, well, it's a skill.
Yeah, and I think I've gone through it around about up to 20 times, and I think I could have whittled it down to 10 favourites. I'll try and find them in the book. This is going to be interesting. Okay, I think I'm going to have to start with the spiny flower mantis.
Oh, yes, they are very handsome, aren't they?
Yeah, sure.
I had a friend who had one of those as a pet when I was a teenager. You can get them in captivity, but they're extraordinary creatures that have this sort of weird mimicry of, I'm not quite sure what they're mimicking, some sort of spiny shrub, I suppose. I'm not 100%
sure what they are mimicking, something spiny, whatever it is.
Yes.
But yeah, I would like a pet mantis, but I think it's going to be a pet jumping spider instead, because they are quite cute, jumping spiders. And the second one would have to be the giant Malaysian leaf insect.
Yeah.
Just because they're so good at camouflage.
They're extraordinary, aren't they?
I haven't seen one in real life, but I've seen videos and pictures.
At London Zoo. Well, they did when I went last, which was a few years ago.
Oh, okay.
They have an insect section at London Zoo. And
do they?
Certainly used to include, and they are, for all the world, like a living leaf. I mean, you look at them and it just looks like a leaf.
They remind me of, we were at Australia Zoo because I'd won the Crikey photography competition in a category which
Very
was the
good.
1100 category, and I also got the People's Choice, and then a runner-up and a highly commended, which was amazing.
Cool.
I was over the
congratulations.
moon because I got to meet Robert Irwin, and it was just incredible going around his zoo. And when we were going around, we went into the Robert's reptile house is called.
Oh, yeah.
And in there they have a death adder, which is a type of snake,
Yeah.
which is incredibly well camouflaged. So we were all looking. Mum and Dad could not see it. To be fair, I was struggling as well. We were just looking at it and thinking, it's an empty cage. And then it was there in plain sight, just staring
They're
at
extraordinary,
us.
aren't they?
It was incredible,
Something
the
about the
camouflage.
patterning, your eye can't seem to latch onto the outline of the actual snake. It's it's like something from a sci-fi movie.
And the other shocking thing was that when we were up in places like Cairns and stuff, that was prime territory for death adders.
Yes, you probably wouldn't want to tread on one in the wild, that's for sure.
It was incredible to see them, though. Oh, I'll have to point out the thorn bugs.
Oh, yeah.
The thorn bugs. They make
seen
incredible
some of them.
noise as well, don't they?
Well, they communicate by making these sort of high-pitched vibrations which travel through the stem of the plants they're sitting on, which is, again, is sort of something we can't detect. But
Yeah.
But yes, they sort of just look like a thorn off a blackberry or something.
Yeah,
But
it is quite incredible. And they come in loads of different shapes and sizes for loads of different plants,
They do.
don't they?
Unfortunately, we could only, skim the surface with what we could include.
Yeah.
But you could have a whole book about thorn bugs, because there are so many different ones.
Yes. It must have been tricky choosing insects to go in this book.
Yeah, I mean, it was sort of frustrating because there were so many that had to not be in it,
Oh.
But and at the same time, I wanted to try and show some of the sort of less glamorous ones, the lice and all that kind of things which people tend to ignore.
Yes. Now try and find them. I missed it. This one right here, the stalk-eyed
flies.
Oh, I love stalk-eyed flies.
I've only ever seen them on the telly, I'm afraid. I'd love to see them in real life.
Yeah, same. I've only seen pictures of them, but they are crazy.
It's extraordinary, isn't it? Why on earth evolution would have... I mean, essentially female flies seem to find males with eyes on the longest stalks possible more attractive.
Yeah.
How weird is that?
It's weird. They must be thinking, how can we make ourselves look impressive? I know.
It's very odd, isn't it? How on earth does evolution come up with things like that?
Yeah, that is nuts.
That's the bumblebee hoverfly we were talking about earlier.
This morning, I was testing Dad with this book, see what his insect knowledge was. And I went, right, I want you to tell me which one's the bumblebee hoverfly and which one is the normal bumblebee. And I covered that.
It fools most people, to be fair.
And first of all, he said they were both bees, but then he sort of figured it out with this one and that one. So, but they do have incredible mimicking, I must say.
Yeah, I think they're maybe the best bumblebee mimic. They certainly fool most normal people, unless if you know what to look for, they're really easy to tell apart. Things like the antennae are completely different, but the overall appearance is very much like a bumblebee.
Yeah, the only way I could roughly tell a normal sort of hoverfly apart from a one that is trying to copy was just its eyes, really, because they're much bigger than the others.
Another good clue.
Only way I've sort of worked out which one's which. And the next one on my favourite, I think I've listed 4 now. I'm on number 5, scorpion flies.
Yeah, I get those in the garden here. You probably get them in your garden as well. They're quite common in the UK, but extraordinary creatures. I mean, this amazing kind of beak.
Yes.
And the males with this peculiar tail that looks for all the world like a sort of curved scorpion sting. Completely harmless. It's not a sting at all. It's just it's used for mating.
Yes.
But they look like little aliens, don't they?
They are quite
creatures.
incredible.
Loosely related to fleas, which is why they're on the same
that's incredible.
page, but obviously very different life cycle.
Very different looking as well.
Yes.
Well, I could just go through hours with that book, so I'm going to have to close. It.
I could write hundreds more, but I don't know whether anyone would buy them. But I'd enjoy writing them. But
well, I definitely enjoy looking through both of these books. They were awesome, especially this one, I must say.
Cool. Well, I'm glad it hit the mark, because it's meant to be just a fun celebration of the insect world.
Yeah.
There's a lot of doom and gloom and all the rest of it, but sometimes you just want to enjoy the amazing diversity of these creatures and not worry too much about other sadder things that may be happening in the world.
Yes. Well, Professor Goulson, thank you so much for coming on my podcast.
It's been great fun.
Oh, it's been awesome to talk to you about, well, many bees, but all insects and even plants. It's been incredible. And we've had a couple of friends come zooming past.
Well, you'll have to come back another time, because I'm sure there's plenty more things we can talk about.
Would be amazing.
Anytime.
Oh, thank you so much. So before I end this outstanding podcast, I've got a couple of riddles for you to try and answer. I wonder if there's a riddle book possible. I've got a little riddle
Insect
book.
riddles. Maybe there is.
Luckily, they are insects. There we go.
I warn you now, I'm rubbish at riddles. My mind just sort of goes blank and nothing comes to it. So don't have high hopes that I'll get any of them right, but fire away.
A couple of people have said that they're horrible at riddles and they've got them all correct, if that's anything.
We'll see.
Okay, let's try and find the things. Okay, so here's the first one. I'm in the garden, buzzing all around, collecting all the pollen that I've found. I don't have a nest or a hive. I only do it so my babies can thrive. My name suggests a crimson shade, and a stoneworker by trade. What am I?
I guess we're talking a red mason here, aren't we? Phew. I got one at least.
Okay, let's try and... I think I try to do them as close as I can together so I don't have to be going through each page. Okay, here's the next one. In Madagascar, roaming on the forest floor, an insect walks around with a great name, that's for sure. With a long neck and awesome wing cases. Definitely a beautiful bug in a beautiful place. What am I?
Ooh. Beautiful. Madagascar. I thought it was going to be a hissing cockroach for a second, because they're from Madagascar, but it clearly isn't, because it's got a long neck. And there's the giraffe beetle. No.
Yeah.
Giraffe beetle?
Yeah.
Yes. Phew.
Giraffe beetles or giraffe weevils are definitely my favourite insect, alongside with bees.
They are really cool,
incredible.
Aren't they? Yes, extraordinary.
And when I was writing these riddles, I was going through the insectarium book thinking I'm going to have to choose a bug room in here. First of all, I thought, well, it's got to be a bee. And then the second one...
Would have been rude not to have
I know. I tried to go a little bit more tricky with that one. It was hard, though, trying to go tricky with the giraffe weevil, because... the neck sort of gives it away every now and again.
Yes. I should have got there straight away.
Nah, it's okay. You did really well on the riddles. Oh, well, Professor Goulson, thank you so much for coming on my podcast. It's been awesome to chat to you about bees, insects, plants, and pretty much everything, really.
We've covered a lot of ground, haven't we?
Yeah.
It's been great fun.
Oh, thank you so much. And thank you, everyone. Wasn't that an awesome podcast? Professor Dave Goulson knows so much about bees. I think I've learnt definitely a lot more about bees today, and I hope I'm going to try and store it all in my brain. But it was just an awesome podcast. Don't forget to subscribe to see more awesome podcasts just like this one. See you there. Oh, and the bee says goodbye as well.